Hey everyone, my name is Prince, and welcome back to another video talking about Speckles the Tarbosaurus. 6 months after I published the Speckles Complete Timeline, I'm finally back with another video talking about Speckles. I have been planning to do these for a very long time, I just haven't got round to it until now. And today we actually have something pretty interesting. Now, this all started, I'm pretty sure, during the time that I was actually making the timeline video. I was looking online for images to use, and that's when I stumbled upon this image. And I looked at this image and I was just like, what is this? Because it's very clearly meant to be Speckles and One Eye, only they look quite a bit different. And eventually I figured out that this must have just been a poster from the very early development days of the first Speckles movie. And after a bit more research, I actually discovered a little bit more. Because as we know, both Speckles movies actually have two separate names. Because in Korea, where the movies were originally made, the two of them were called Speckles the Tarbosaurus and Speckles the Tarbosaurus 2, The New Paradise. But then when they got an international release, they were renamed to The Dino King and Dino King Journey to Fire Mountain, as we know. But after a bit of research, I discovered that the first Speckles movie was originally going to be called something completely different. Something that would actually make a lot more sense, given that the first Speckles movie was obviously a sequel to the previous entry in the series, Tarbosaurus, the Mightiest Ever. And the name that they were originally going for this second entry in the series was Tarbosaurus, The Duel Begins. So I found that out and thought that was interesting, but fast forward a little bit, I found this. Now, this is the original teaser trailer for the original version of Speckles the Tarbosaurus back when it was still being called Tarbosaurus The Duel Begins. And this teaser trailer actually includes a fuck ton of old shots and deleted scenes that were altered or removed entirely before it became Speckles the Tarbosaurus. So this is a teaser trailer that they clearly made in the very, very early days of development, because I've watched about the first 40 seconds of this just to check it out and see if it was actually, you know, worth watching and doing a video on. And there is so much in this trailer that is not featured in the final movie. So I just thought this was a really cool thing to make a video on, considering this is basically 1 minute and 50 seconds of deleted scenes from the first film. And deleted scenes are always really cool to look at and talk about, so I thought I might as well make a video on them. So we're gonna watch the whole thing first, and then go through it and analyze everything there is to see in this trailer. Also, I apologize for the terrible audio and video quality of this trailer. This is literally the only version of it I could find anywhere. So without further ado, let's watch it. Okay, so some of these shots are obviously going to be sort of similar. Oh, it's that early 2000s announcer voice for trailers. See, that's new. See, like I said, some of these shots are going to be similar or the same to what was actually in the actual movie, but obviously some of them are going to be different. You can tell that this is like an early 2000s trailer. And the music is very recognizable. See, already all of this is fucking different. This is crazy to see all of the different... Wow, this... again, I haven't seen all of this. It's just crazy to see all of the different shots. Again, I apologize that it's so low quality. Jesus. This is actually really cool. And that was the original name. Right, everyone. Well, that was the trailer, so let's go and talk about it, because there is a lot to talk about in this trailer. Right, so I've muted the audio and I've put it to half the speed. Let's go through this. Right. Okay, that shot, I'm pretty sure that is actually in the movie. That's the shot where Speckles has just been spooked by the Microraptor, and then the big pterosaur flies overhead. I'm pretty sure it was lower in the actual film than that, but I'm pretty sure that that's just a slightly modified shot that was actually in the original film. Okay, this shot of the pterosaur flying out over the ocean and the lakes and stuff, that is still in the film, and I'm pretty sure that is pretty much exactly the same as it is shown here. Again, I apologize that it's so low quality. Again, this is the only version of this trailer that I could find on YouTube. I'm not sure about this bit. It sort of reminds me a little bit of that part, where Speckles is talking about the mating season, and there's a bunch of dinosaurs everywhere. I think this might be reminiscent of that slightly. Okay, now this scene with the Ankylosaurus, this is definitely not in the final film. There's nothing even remotely similar to this in the final film. But that's definitely the Ankylosaurus model that they used for Speckles 1, so clearly they'd made all of the models at this point. Or were close to having finished and finalized all of the models, because as we saw, the models for Speckles and One Eye were actually a little bit different. Okay, so there, just then, we had two Pachycephalosaurus butting heads. I'm pretty sure that scene is actually still in the final film, just from a different angle. And again, it's during the bit where Speckles talking about the mating season. We have a bunch of Coronosaurus here. They're just browsing. Again, this isn't in the final film either, but this could be, I guess, a sort of old version of the bit right before Speckles and his family are about to go and do a hunt. Again, this is pretty much exactly the same as it is in the final film. I don't think they really altered this sequence very much. Okay, now this bit right here is very different. Now, obviously, this is supposed to be Speckles right here, but this shot right here of the nest, this is actually the zoomed out shot. This is the shot that they use when Speckles and Blue Eyes return to the nest after they defeated One Eye. And when they do that, they are literally about this big. Gesturing with my mouse here. They are about this big. So Speckles is gigantic in this scene. In this shot, he is way oversized considering, you know, what they ended up using this shot for. But obviously, this is a shot that is not in the film. Like, there's nothing even close to this that is in the film. Now, this is a very recognizable shot because this is seemingly a very old version of the shot where Speckles' 4 subadult and adult family members are looking out over the herd of Coronosaurus and they're about to go hunting. But obviously here we seemingly only have Speckles, which is really interesting because it does make me wonder, you know, what this movie was originally going to contain. Because as far as I saw, there weren't actually any shots at all of the rest of Speckles' family, although I did briefly see a shot of Blue Eyes. So it makes me wonder what the film itself was actually going to contain. Maybe it was going to begin with Speckles already being fully grown. Although that would be a bit weird considering that it is meant to be a sequel to The Mightiest Ever, so you know, I'm not sure about that. So here we get the sort of first initial shot of the model that they were going to use for this. And in fairness, you can tell it's Speckles. Like, it looks pretty similar to how Speckles looks in the final movie. In all honesty, the only difference is that I think he just looks a bit rougher. Like, the model isn't as refined and there's just a lot of rough edges, and he looks a bit more animalistic. I think maybe a bit more natural, because obviously the dinosaurs in the final movie of Speckles actually looked a tad bit cartoony. Only a tad bit, obviously. It's nothing compared to what they did to them in Journey to Fire Mountain, obviously, but I think this was the sort of stepping stone between the versions of the models in The Mightiest Ever and what they ended up going with in the final version of the first Speckles movie. Also, I think this is potentially an earlier version of the scene where Quix is about to ambush the Tyrannosaurus. I think right before the stampede, or maybe even in the first hunting sequence. Just the way he's crouched down like this and the sort of background, it looks sort of very reminiscent of that. I'm sure some of you will say that it's pretty sad that I'm able to discern that just from this blurry-ass trailer, but need I remind you that I spent months working on the Speckles timeline, going frame by frame and taking screenshots, hundreds of them I might add, for use in that video. And then we have this shot, and I must say, the version of the model there, we can see it a lot clearer. It's definitely a lot more animalistic. Again, I apologize that it's so blurry, but you can see that, like, it is a lot rougher and a lot less, you know, animated looking as the actual final versions were. And again, I do think this is just an earlier version of the sequence in which Quix is chasing the Tyrannosaurus, because the sort of body movements and the way he's running here is very reminiscent of the way Quix was running after the Tyrannosaurus in the final movie. Now here we get our first shot of One Eye, albeit a very blurry one. Now whilst doing research, I did actually find some cleaner screenshots that are less blurry from this trailer, so we'll go over them after we've finished with this trailer. But from what I can see here, and from what I've saw throughout the rest of the trailer, it seems as though they didn't really change One Eye that much, because this model seems to be very similar to the model they ended up going with. And I think the only difference is they probably changed the color of him a little bit to be a lot more red and a lot more vibrant and less pale than he seems to be here. But this shot, I'm not entirely sure where this is meant to be. It could be an early version of where he's watching Speckles and his family, or just Speckles, considering we don't even know if Speckles' family was in this early version, from the sort of sandstony mountains near the beginning of the film. Maybe this is just an early version of that. And we've got another shot of Speckles roaring here. Again, here, this is a little bit clearer. You can really see that this is obviously Speckles. It's just the model is... it's a tiny bit different. It's hard to pick out the actual differences, but I just think he's made to look a lot more animalistic and a teeny bit less animated than he is in the final product. Looking at the background of this, I think this could actually be an early version of the sequence where Speckles' mother roars after killing the Tyrannosaurus. Moving on from that, we have this really cool shot of One Eye and Speckles about to duke it out, and here we can see One Eye a bit more clearly, and it does look like he looks basically the same, apart from having slightly less vibrant colors to him. But what's weird in this sequence is that it seems as though they're actually fighting around the same area where the hunting sequence takes place in the final movie. Which again makes me wonder how the plot would have differed in this version of the movie, because a lot of the shots that I'm seeing here don't really fit with the final movie that we all know. Now, this is a shot that was in the final movie. This was the shot of the random mountain that they showed us right after Speckles and Blue Eyes reached the hot spring. This shot with the sun being obscured by clouds is also still in the final movie. This happens right before the volcanic eruption destroys Speckles' forest. This is a shot that we should all recognize, because this is clearly just an old version of the shot when Speckles is about to jump into the ocean to save Junior. Although in this version of the shot, it isn't Speckles running forward to jump off the cliff, it's just him looking off over it, just standing there. Then we get an old shot of Speckles and Blue Eyes traveling towards the hot spring. This is definitely what this is meant to be. So clearly Blue Eyes, or some version of Blue Eyes, was in the film at this point. I don't know about the rest of Speckles' family, but clearly Blue Eyes was in the film at this point. It's really weird to think about though, because considering that the majority of the shots in this trailer are completely different than what we saw in the final movie. That means that at this stage, they had concepted, created models for, and planned out an entirely different movie, basically, and then for some reason, they decided to go with something entirely different. My best guess is that at this point, while it was still called Tarbosaurus The Duel Begins, they were trying to make it more of a sequel to Tarbosaurus the Mightiest Ever, meaning that they were solely trying to make it more of a documentary rather than a documentary adventure movie hybrid. Now here, that is very clearly meant to be an old version of the shot where the twins are knocked off of the cliff. And I must say, I'm very glad that the shot they ended up using in the movie looked nothing like this, because this looks ridiculous. And it's also pretty weird considering that seemingly Speckles was gonna get knocked off a cliff during the old version of this movie and somehow surviving. Here we have another shot of Speckles, and here he looks the most similar to the way he looks in the final product. I think from this shot I can actually tell what the actual difference is between this sort of old model and the model they used in the final film. Because I think the big difference is that his head is actually shorter and bulkier than it is in the final movie. Looking at it here, I can sort of see that it's a sort of similar shape to the sort of skull shape that they use for the models in Tarbosaurus the Mightiest Ever, which of course makes sense considering this was clearly meant to be a lot more of a sequel than Speckles the Tarbosaurus ended up being. We've got another shot of the pterosaurs flying. I want to say that that is an old, or just the actual version of the scene where the pterosaurs are flying towards the cliffs right before Speckles is about to steal their eggs. I'm thinking that's where this shot is from. That was an area of the timeline that I didn't really focus on very much when I was making the timeline video because it's not really important. That's another shot of the pterosaur sort of zooming along. I think that might just be an old version of the shot where the camera's focused fully on the pterosaur as it flies. So I think this must have just been an earlier version where instead of solely being focused on the pterosaur throughout the whole shot, they were, you know, having it approach from the distance. Right, here we have a shot of Speckles running, followed by a Hypsilophodon, and then Speckles again. That is a very recognizable shot, and I think that's actually a combination of a lot of different shots that were actually used in the final movie. Because these scenes with Speckles are very clearly meant to be old versions of the scene in which Speckles and his siblings are running away from the Therizinosaurus. But I'm pretty sure this Hypsilophodon scene is actually still in the movie, and it comes from the bit where the Velociraptors are chasing it. So I guess in the original there was supposed to be a scene where Speckles was chasing a Hypsilophodon, which is really weird when you think about it, considering that a Hypsilophodon is not the type of prey that a Tarbosaurus would usually go for. They're too fast and they're too small to warrant the effort of chasing it. Another shot of the pterosaur. I'm pretty sure this is still in the film as well, if maybe a bit altered. Now this is a shot that's definitely in the film because this is the shot from the desert after Blue Eyes dies, where the herds are still carrying on through the desert trying to find a new home. Although I think the camera direction is actually going the other way this time, so that's a slight alteration. And that's immediately followed obviously by the shots of the herd making their way along the coast towards the distant paradise near the end of the film. We get another really good shot of Speckles here, and this is clearly meant to be on the coast during the final battle as well. Yeah, his head is definitely a lot shorter and a lot more bulky than it is in the final movie. And we have another shot of One Eye here running forwards to engage Speckles, and again, you can see that he is basically the same model, but the colors are just different. Like, his head is more of an paley orange color, and the rest of his body is basically just a pale yellow. And they're fighting here, obviously. That actually looks pretty cool. More shots of them fighting, although the animation there isn't the best. I guess it kind of makes sense considering how early all of this clearly was. Yeah, you can really see how pale One Eye's colors are there. That is insane. He is so pale, my god. They seriously just put all of his textures into Photoshop and then just turned up the vibrance. But the background of this shot does look slightly different as well to the actual scene of the final battle. Those cliffy, rocky bits are very different. There's far more space. And plus, there shouldn't be any blue sky behind them there because they were, like, next to a giant rock face. Okay, this scene perplexes me, because this environment is the environment that they used right after Speckles, Blue Eyes, and their children escaped the forest, when all of the herds had left the forest right before Blue Eyes' death. But it shows Speckles and One Eye fighting here, so I don't know, you know, how the events of the movie would lead to them fighting here. Although then again, I guess in this early version of the film, this desert wasn't meant to be that specific location that it was in the final film. But it's just weird. I'm just not sure how or why One Eye and Speckles would come to be fighting in the middle of a desert. Okay, now this is a very, very recognizable shot because this is basically identical to the shot in the movie where they're facing off and circling one another right next to the cliff. Although one thing I've only just noticed though, Junior is not in this shot. No, he's not in that shot at all. So if Junior wasn't even in this section of the film, then why was Speckles looking out into the ocean? Very peculiar. I tell you what, I really would like to know, like, what was going on behind the scenes when this movie was originally getting made. Because I had no idea that everything was gonna be so different, clearly. Another very cool shot of One Eye running towards Speckles there on the edge of the cliff, which again isn't in the final film. And then the final shot right here. That's badass. I'm also trying to figure out what environment this is meant to be. I want to say it's actually, it looks similar to the environment that One Eye was, like, walking off into after being defeated by Speckles and Blue Eyes. But I have no idea where this is meant to be. I don't really recognize this environment. Or maybe it was like a prototype of the sort of area in which Blue Eyes died. I have no idea. But yeah, Speckles was originally going to be called Tarbosaurus the Door Begins. Speckles the Tarbosaurus is definitely a better name. And clearly it was gonna be quite a lot different when it was first getting made. Right, well that trailer was pretty blurry, but I have found some screenshots from this trailer that are actually in a lot better quality, so let's have a look at those. So first off, we have that really epic shot from the end of the trailer, and the shot with the two of them next to the ocean. And you can see, again, unblurred, there is no Junior. He would be here, but it's just Speckles and Blue Eyes. And also, one thing that I've sort of just clicked onto, if we look at Speckles here, where we can see him a lot more clearly, obviously, it doesn't look like Speckles has his speckles. You can't see the little dark green spots on his face, so maybe originally Speckles wasn't even gonna be called Speckles. That's a pretty weird thing to think about. But you can definitely see here that One Eye has, like, most of the colors that he has in the final movie. They're just a lot less vibrant and, you know, desaturated, I guess. And again, it does look a lot more natural, I think, than what they actually went with. Not that I'm complaining, obviously. One Eye looks really, really cool in the final movie. And you can see his scar here, and I think a few of his scars here as well. So moving on, we have a shot of the pterosaur flying overhead. Again, this is reasonably similar to the one in the final movie, although I think the scale of the dinosaurs is they're a bit big compared to the environment. Also, this Tyrannosaurus is massive. It should be a lot smaller considering it's right next to a Pujangosaurus. But then we have a really cool, very clear shot of One Eye. He looks, if anything, more menacing there than he does in the final movie. My god. Then we've got the shot of the Pujangosaurus browsing again, and then the massive shot of Speckles looking out over his domain. Very clearly, they sort of altered the size of the environments quite a bit for the final movie. Or not the size of the environments, just how big or small the dinosaurs were going to be in comparison to the environments. Then, of course, we have another shot of One Eye here. You can see the paler colors. His face is a little bit differently shaped. This is him from the other side, obviously, so he doesn't have his scar. But again, he looks, like, really monstrous here. Again, I think he looks more terrifying here than he actually does in the final movie. We've got a different shot here where Speckles is a little bit smaller and the lighting is a little bit different. Then we have a few shots from the final version of the movie. Obviously here we have young Speckles with Quicks and his mother. And then we have a sort of refined version of the shot that was this one, where everything's a little bit smaller and a little bit better sized. The rest of the pictures were just from the final film, but at the very bottom of the last page, we have a HD version of the original poster, which again makes them look a lot more animalistic and monstrous than they look in the actual final film. But yeah, everyone, that's pretty much it for everything that we have to talk about in this video. It was really interesting to go through that trailer and these images and sort of have a look at what Speckles the Tarbosaurus could have been. Again, it's clear that, like I said, they were clearly trying to go for a more accurate sequel to Tarbosaurus the Mightiest Ever and make it more of a documentary like the first movie in the series more than a documentary adventure story. Not to mention, obviously, and I cannot believe that I didn't mention this when we were watching the trailer, but the music in the trailer is the main theme for Tarbosaurus the Mightiest Ever. So potentially they weren't even going to make a new soundtrack and they were just going to use the same soundtrack that they used for TME. Which, in fairness, I'm very glad they decided against, considering the Speckles the Tarbosaurus soundtrack is one of the greatest soundtracks I have ever heard in my entire life. But I really hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and go join the Speckles the Tarbosaurus unofficial Discord down in the description down below. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and I will see you on another video very, very soon. Goodbye, everyone.